Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a place where history isn't just, tucked away in books. It's carved right into mountains, built into the land itself. We're talking millennia, not just centuries. Today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that kind of place. Bisotun in Kermanshah, Iran. We've got a stack of sources here, mainly focusing on a really great travel magazine piece. Covers the history, the sites, even how to visit.
Yeah, it's one of those locations that's, well, it's hard to pin down easily. What the sources really drive home is just the sheer density of history, layer upon layer of human activity, all on this commanding natural stage. You really sense how different civilizations saw this spot, felt its importance, and just had to leave their mark. Honestly, there are some real aha moments when you start putting the pieces together from these readings.
Right. And our mission today is to kind of navigate through all this information, pull out the core stuff, the essentials that make Bisotun so significant, globally speaking. We want to give you that informed perspective, without getting totally bogged down in every single detail. Get the key insights fast. So let's dive in.
Okay. And the setting is really crucial here. The sources place Bisotun in the Zagros Mountains, Kermanshah province. It's about 30 kilometers northeast of Kermanshah city itself, right on the old road heading towards Hamadan.
And that location, it wasn't just scenic, was it? The article really stresses its strategic value through history. It was a major transit point, like a necessary stop on those ancient routes connecting big centers like Babylon or later Baghdad through the mountains towards places like Ecbatana, a literal crossroads of empires.
Exactly. That position as a kind of bottleneck or nexus point explains so much about why it was so important and why rulers and armies and traders paid attention to it for, well, thousands of years.
But if there's one thing that really defines Bisotun for the world, the absolute icon, it has to be the Bisotun Inscription, doesn't it? The sources are clear, it's huge, maybe the biggest of its kind, and just one of the most vital historical documents anywhere, carved way up high on this massive cliff face.
Its importance is, it's hard to overstate. The sources tell us it was commissioned by Darius the Great himself, the Achaemenid king. He wanted a permanent record, his record, of how he took power, how he defeated the rival claimant Gaumata the Magus, how he secured the throne, his plans for the empire. It's basically his testament for future generations, his version of events.
And the content sounds incredible, almost like reading an ancient king's diary or, memoir. Darius talks about the chaos after Cyrus the Great died, this Gaumata rebellion that swept the empire, and then his own campaigns to crush it. And crucially, he frames it all as him being the legitimate ruler, saying his success, his authority, it all came directly from the god Hiram Mazda.
Right. But here's where it gets really fascinating and why it's so famous beyond just the history, the linguistics. The sources emphasize this wasn't just written in one script. Darius had it carved in 3 different languages: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian cuneiform.
3 languages, side by side on the same rock.
Exactly. Think of it like a massive ancient translation monument. And that multilingual aspect, that was the absolute key. Because in the 19th century, when scholars like Henry Rawlinson were struggling to figure out these ancient cuneiform scripts found all over Mesopotamia and Iran, well, the Bisotun inscription was their breakthrough, their Rosetta Stone.
Ah, the Rosetta Stone analogy. Perfect. Because you had the same text in different scripts, including one they were starting to understand, Old Persian. It let them decipher the others.
Precisely. It unlocked our ability to read vast archives from ancient Iran, ancient Mesopotamia. It opened up entire civilizations whose voices had been silent for centuries. That single inscription, high on a cliff, fundamentally changed our understanding of the ancient world. Kind of blows you away, really.
It really does. Which makes you wonder about the name Bisotun. Is there a story behind that too? The article mentions its origins.
There is, and it seems connected to the inscription. The sources suggest that originally, maybe because of this huge carving, the place felt sacred. The name might have been Bagistan, which apparently means something like place of the gods. Over time, you know how language shifts, it evolved. Went through maybe Bahistan, then Bahistan, which people started interpreting as good column, maybe thinking of the inscription or the mountain itself. And eventually it settled as Bisotun. The article specifically notes it's pronounced as one word.
Wow, place of gods to good column to Bisotun. That's quite a journey for a name. It reflects how people saw the place over time. So after Darius made his mark, what happened? Did Bisotun just fade away? The sources trace its story.
Not at all. It stayed important. The Sasanians, the next great Iranian empire, they valued the site too. They added their own monuments, as we'll see. And even into the Islamic period, there was new construction, like that big caravanserai. Now, maybe its role as like a primary political center lessened for periods, but its historical weight never really disappeared. Then, boom, 19th century, Rawlinson deciphers the inscription, and suddenly it's back on the global map for academics. And today, the sources confirm it's a major draw for tourism. And of course, it got UNESCO World Heritage status back in 2006, fully recognized.
So it kept finding new relevance. That's fascinating. Okay, beyond the main inscription, the sources talk about other layers there, right? Other finds within the complex.
Oh yeah, it's packed. You find traces from different eras all around. There are other rock reliefs, for instance. The sources mention one called the Gudar's relief. That's Sasanian art, showing a hero figure from Persian epics. And interestingly, it's carved above the Darius inscription. Another layer, literally. And there are others too, like one linked to a figure named Merdad Ashkani.
Merdad Ashkani. That sounds Parthian, right? Didn't the source mention something called the Sanj Balash, the Balash stone?
Exactly, yes. That's a Parthian carving, showing King Balash. The sources point out how valuable this is because, well, we just don't have as much surviving Parthian art or detailed records compared to the Achaemenids or Sasanians. So this carving gives us these precious little windows into their royal style, their clothing, customs, maybe even their beliefs.
So you could be standing there looking at Achaemenid, then Parthian, then Sasanian art, all on the rock faces.
Yeah.
A timeline in stone? What about actual buildings? The Shah Abbasi caravanserai sounds pretty grand.
It really is a major structure from the Safavid era, much later. The source describes that classic Iranian architecture. 4 iwans, these big arched halls facing onto a central courtyard. Apparently it has some nice plaster decoration inside, and they built it strategically facing Darius's inscription, almost like a nod to the ancient history. And the article says it's been beautifully restored. It's now a complex with a hotel, a museum showing local finds, and a space for events. Plus, it's part of that larger group of Iranian caravanserais that got collective World Heritage status, too.
That's fantastic, given an old building new purpose like that. The sources also mention a Sasanian palace, or remnants of one.
Yes, the Bisotun Palace remains. Sources describe partly excavated foundations from the Sasanian period. Looks like complex architecture, probably ceremonial, maybe residential, and significantly it was right on that ancient road, again, reinforcing that connection to travel and power.
And even a bridge.
The Bisotun Bridge, yeah, crosses the Dinarab River. The source says its original foundations are likely Sasanian, though obviously restored over the centuries. It was a practical part of that whole communication and trade network passing through. The article does add a note of caution, though, saying that unfortunately, many other historical structures in the immediate area are, well, largely lost to time, just ruins.
Still, it sounds like basically every major Iranian empire left its footprint there. What about even earlier history? Anything religious or, say, prehistoric and mentioned?
Yes, the sources do mention ancient sanctuaries in the complex, some potentially thousands of years old, predating even the Achaemenids. They offer these, well, often fragmented but fascinating glimpses into earlier rituals and beliefs. There's specific mention of a Median sanctuary found within the mountain itself.
And the sources also mention Take Bostan nearby. Is that part of the same complex?
Not exactly part of the Bisotun complex itself, but nearby and often visited together. The sources describe Takabastan as this important collection of Sasanian rock carvings. They're famous for depicting things like royal coronations, hunting scenes, really detailed stuff. The article highlights their artistry, historical value, and the nice setting near some springs.
Okay, so this incredible mix of history carvings, palaces, bridges spanning millennia. But Bisotun isn't just stones and structures, is it? The sources talk about its natural beauty, too.
Absolutely. The setting is fundamental. Sarabi Bisotun, the spring there, is described as this beautiful spot, clear water. And historically, that spring was vital. You need a reliable water source in the mountains. It was essential for travelers, for any settlement. Today, the sources say it's more a place for visitors to just relax, enjoy the surroundings.
And the wider environment sounds beautiful, too. Mentions of seasonal waterfalls, green mountains, valleys. The sources suggest it's great for hiking, for nature lovers. Diverse plants and animals mentioned, too.
It really emphasizes that this wasn't just some dusty archaeological site. It was and is a living landscape. The history and nature are completely intertwined there. You can't separate them.
Speaking of the natural landscape, the caves mentioned in the sources sound intriguing. That adds a whole other layer.
It does, a totally different kind of exploration. The sources give an overview of several natural caves in the area, each offering a slightly different window into geology or deep history.
Which ones did the article highlight?
Well, Shakarkian Cave is a big one, archaeologically speaking. The sources date finds their way back to the Paleolithic era. We're talking tens of thousands of years ago. Excavations have turned up ancient stone tools, animal bones, and get this, evidence suggesting Neanderthals used the cave.
Neanderthals, wow. Okay, that pushes the timeline way, way back. Incredible.
Forgot about the
other caves.
There's more Tarik Cave. The name means dark or black cave, and apparently it lives up to the name. Sources mention its reputation for total darkness, significant depth.
Yeah.
It's described as more mysterious, really for experienced cavers. Stalactites, stalagmites, maybe underground pools, needs gear, needs guides. Definitely not casual exploring.
Sounds intense. A proper adventure.
And then there's Morkarl Cave, also called Chalkarl. The article suggests this one's easier to get into, more popular for regular visitors. It apparently has a bigger entrance. It's brighter inside than Tarik. More accessible.
Okay, so from gods and kings on cliffs to empires on trade routes, right back to our ancient relatives in caves, Bisotun is just teeming with stories. And the sources also touch on how these physical places connect with legend and art, right?
Oh, absolutely. You really can't talk about Bisotun without bringing up the legend of Farhad Tarash. This refers to this huge, smoothed rock face near the main inscription. It looks like it was prepared for something, but never finished. Now, archaeologists have theories maybe for another inscription, maybe a building foundation, maybe just quarrying stone, practical reasons. But as the sources strongly emphasize, this spot is famously deeply linked in Persian culture to the epic romance of Farhad and Shirin.
Ah, the story of Farhad the stonemason carving the mountain for love of Princess Shirin.
That's the one. The sources highlight how this legend has just completely captured the popular imagination for centuries. It makes that rock face a symbol of eternal love, of immense effort, of perseverance, regardless of what its original practical purpose might have been.
That's a powerful example of how stories give meaning to places. And the article does stress how Bisotun, with all its history, nature, legend, it's been a huge inspiration for artists, for writers, particularly in Persian tradition.
Profoundly so. It appears again and again in Persian literature and art. The sources describe it as a symbol of grandeur, endurance, beauty, permanence. The Farhad and Shirin story is the most famous example, obviously, but the sheer presence of the place resonates through the culture.
And circling back to the location, that crossroads idea, the sources reinforce that it wasn't just a waypoint, but a real meeting place.
Yes, definitely. Because it was on those key ancient routes, parts of which later became the Silk Road Bisotun, was a place where cultures and goods inevitably met and mixed. Achaemenids, Sasanians, Parthians, traders from all over. It facilitated that exchange. It wasn't just somewhere to pass through. It was a place where different worlds really did intersect.
Okay, so for anyone listening whose interest is really sparked by all this and might think about actually going, the sources did include some practical tips, thankfully.
They did give the basics, yeah. Getting there from Kermanshah city is apparently just a short drive. You head northeast on the eastern bypass, the road towards Hamadan. Visiting hours, they mention seasonal differences, generally like 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. in fall and winter, maybe longer, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in spring and summer, but best to check, probably. And ticket costs, they noted different prices for Iranian nationals and foreign visitors, and obviously warned that costs can change. Standard stuff.
Good to have that basic info anyway. So stepping back and looking at everything we've unpacked from these sources, Bisotun really is extraordinary. You've got this incredible treasure chest of ancient history, the Achaemenid inscription that changed everything, Parthian art, Sasanian reliefs and buildings, that lovely Safavid caravanserai, traces of even older sanctuaries. Then there's the natural beauty of the spring, the mountains, and the caves. Taking us back to the Paleolithic to Neanderthals, it's just this amazing convergence point for deep history, powerful legends, and stunning nature.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is seeing how all these different pieces, a king's decree carved in stone, an ancient trade route, a vital spring, cave dwellers from millennia ago, a romantic folk tale. They don't just sit there separately. They interact. They build on each other. They enrich our understanding of how humans have engaged with this specific place over such an immense span of time. It's not just the individual facts from the sources, it's seeing how they connect.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has given you, our listener, that quick but rounded view, a sense of the many layers that make Bisotun so unique and important.
And maybe just one final thought to leave you with, drawing from the sources themselves. Remember how the earliest name might have been Bagistan, place of the gods, inspired by that awe-inspiring inscription? Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If these places where nature and massive human effort meet were seen as sacred, as divine way back then, what is it about sites like Bisotun that still inspires that sense of wonder in us today? That feeling of something vast, something ancient, something maybe just beyond our everyday grasp? Something to think about?